praying for you. We really are. Kathy, God bless you. It's so good to see you, hon. I know you still got some procedures coming up. We're going to be much in prayer for you, okay? God bless you, sweetie. Harmony. We touched on it in our prayer concerns. It's so important. Harmony in the world, harmony in our nation, harmony in our churches. And harmony at home. I remember the first band I was ever in. That was officially a band. I had just thrashed around with some other guys. I guess you would call it garage bands. The only thing we tried to do was to see who could be the loudest. Now, during that time, I was a drummer, and I had acoustic drums, so I could drown them out. One of my best buddies that I went to school with was in a band, a tremendous guitar player. One of the best. And he was in a local band. He come to me one day at school, and he said, would you be interested in coming down and sitting in, rehearsing a little bit? Because their drummer had taken a job, which means he had to leave the area. So I said, sure. Now keep in mind, I was going from thrashing around with a bunch of guys in a garage band to probably the best known band in this area. Just like that. But I knew, they made it clear, this is temporary. And I was great with that. Some of y'all would remember this band, Marlowe Tackett, the old Southern Kings. So I went down and rehearsed with them. And we went out and played some shows. And by the way, I ended up getting the job. They come to me in a few weeks and said, we don't need to look any farther. You want the job? You got it. But it was at that time that I first heard a couple of things that really revolutionized my whole concept of music. One of them was a bass guitar. I'd never played with a bass guitar. By the way, I have, I think at last count, 9 bass guitars. But the other thing that I heard that I had never really experienced was harmony. A fellow by the name of Dale Cordell played guitar and sung harmony. Had the most beautiful tenor voice. I'd never heard anything like that. We were just thrashing, trying to play Led Zeppelin or something, they didn't harmonize. But I experienced harmony. And for several years, we went down as a choir down when the association did their music school. And I remember sitting there with hundreds of voices. And I thought, wow, This has to be a little preview of what heaven's going to be like. Harmony. As I said a moment ago, it is extremely important in all phases and facets of life. But I don't know any place that it's more important than in the home. And I got to be honest with you, there is so much turmoil in homes today. You know what's so sad about it? That upheaval, that turmoil affects our schools. These teachers would be quick to tell you that. In fact, my wife and I were talking to a school teacher recently who happens to be teaching some kids that would be called problem kids. And at the root, in every case, the home life was horrible. Horrible. She talked about one little girl as she was trying to restrain her as much as she was allowed to do, biting her. She said, I had marks all over me. And the school life really was an effect of what the home life was like. Now, dads, what's that got to do with us? Harmony. I had the privilege several years of being a band leader. It was the greatest job I ever had. The musicians looked to me. In the home, Dad is to be the band leader. If there, and I know there are circumstances, if there is not harmony in the home, there's a good case, a good chance that Dad is not fulfilling his duty. This psalm that we're going to read gives us 5 wonderful truths about Dad. Psalm 128, verse 1. Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house, thy children like olive plants around thy table. Behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. Let's look at some things about Dad. First, we're going to focus on his character. And it's a character that he lives. He has character, and he lives out that character. Look again at verse 1. Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his, whose? God's ways. There's so much talk about success in our world. There are seminars, there are books written that just focus on how to be successful. And society is thoroughly convinced that to be successful, you have to be a CEO of some corporation. You have to have a name, not one necessarily that's associated with character, but you have to have a name that's recognizable. And we put all of these things, this list of things that define a successful man. You know the problem with that? If you research those who have reached some of these corporate ladders, you'll find that they are some of the most discontented, most lonely people in the world. They have achieved these pinnacles of success, and the world lauds them. But inside, there's nothing but turmoil. The psalmist said, "The blessed man is the one that fears the Lord, and the one that walks in His ways." I'll never be known outside of Carter County other than just pastoring. And it's not about a name. It isn't about a pinnacle. It isn't about the size of the congregation. You know what I want more than anything? That my children and grandchildren and great-grandchild will say, "Dad, Papa, he was a man of character." I can tell you that with all sincerity. To me, that would be the greatest thing that could ever be said about me. He was a person who had character, and he lived out that character. He fleshed that character out. Second, notice the contentment that he learns. So many discontented people, so many angry people in our world. I don't think they've read verse 2. "For thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee." I said a moment ago, if you think the pinnacle of life as a man is to be able to achieve all of this success and this notoriety, and if you think that's it, the inherent problem is there's never enough. There's that initiative, there's that drive. There's just never enough. There's so many dads today that are spending their whole life trying to build up. And within godly perimeters, there's nothing wrong with that. No. God is not against wealth. Absolutely not. You know who the happy dads are? Those who are living and fleshing out their character, and it brings them contentment. It was the Apostle Paul writing to Timothy, who said godliness, and the word means character. He said godliness with contentment is great gain. Dad, if you have the Lord Jesus Christ living in your heart because you have a relationship with Him, and you're doing everything within your power to carry out what you believe He wills for your life, and you're living that in front of your wife and your children, if you have those, and everyone else around you, you're a happy man. It doesn't mean that there won't be problems in your life. There will be. But part of contentment knows that and trusts God all the way through it. Thirdly, there's the companion that he loves. Our focus now moves to mom. Verse 3, thy wife shall be a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house. You'd have to understand the context here. There was a time, and it's not at this particular time the way that it used to be. But there was a time that families were big. My wife was one of 10. I've told you many times. When I dated her, the first time we got together with all the family, I thought, oh my goodness, I'd never seen anything like this. I'm an only child. But you know what? I fell in love with the family. And I fell in love with that concept. Families were big. I look back there at Houston, and so many of the kids come today to honor him. You don't see large families anymore. It's almost a thing of the past. And part of that's, I know, the effect of the economy and a lot of other things, and a lot of particularly women, they have careers, they're busy, and they make that choice. And I'm not being negative to that. I think the husband and wife need to know each other well enough to where they can make that decision and be happy with it. Be pleased. But in the day that this was written, there were women who could not conceive, just like today. And society in that day looked upon that almost to the effect that it was a curse from God if they could not conceive and have children. It's interesting to me, in that man-only world, nothing is said about the man. It's always the woman. The psalmist said that the wife will be as a fruitful vine, which climbs up the side of the house. And the husband is to be to his wife what that wall is to the vine. To bring stability. To support her. To give her strength and help. Because he's the male. He does everything within his power to fulfill his God-given duty to his wife. And I've been hearing it all since the 80s and everything else with women's liberation. Let me tell you something. Dad, you be to your wife, your mate, what you should be. And if you are to your wife what you should be, you worship her, you support her, you do everything within your power to help her. If you do that for your wife, guess what? She will accept your role as the leader of the house. She will do it. Because she's spiritual enough to know that that design is from God. Fourthly, the children that he leads. If the family is so blessed, and sometimes, as I said a moment ago, the family may want children and not be able to biologically have them. One of the great facets of our day is that there are all kinds of small children that need to be in a place where they'll be sheltered, where they'll be taken care of, where they'll be spoon-fed the Word of God. There's all kinds of those children out there. And it is a beautiful thing. And I have had the privilege before to go into judges' chambers and watch as adoptions take place. They're beautiful. It's beautiful. But what about the children that we are biologically able to produce? Again, verse 3, thy children like olive plants around thy table. Did you know that the olive plant in the Bible is a sign of fruitfulness? Yeah. A healthy olive tree can provide fruit for as many as 20 generations. Now, a generation is said to be 25, 30 years. So even at 25 years, that's 500 years. 500 years fruitfulness. And as I said, in that society, it was a sign. Many children was a sign of God's blessing. I love children. I really do. Mine and those that God has blessed us with in this church. I love them. Raising kids can be like anything else. There's going to be trying times. We all understand that. But I'll tell you one thing. There's going to be blessed times. I was scanning down through Facebook today, and there was just so many references from people who were thankful for their dad. And that warms the heart of that father, I promise you. So there's the character that he lives, and there's the contentment that he learns. He's happy. The companion that he loves. The children that he leads. And finally, the contribution that he leaves. I think the doxology of this psalm is in the last two verses. Look at verse 5. The Lord shall bless thee out of Zion, and thou shalt see the good of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, thou shalt see thy children's children, and peace upon Israel. Isn't it beautiful how the psalmist puts peace in Jerusalem, which is so important? It was then, and I promise you it is now. How much he associates that with the Father. The contribution. I remember an old song years ago. It was in the form of a question. What will we leave behind? And dads, that's a good checkup for every one of us. I've already told you a moment ago how I would rather be remembered than anything else as far as family is concerned. Dad was a man of character. But we have a privilege to be a contribution to the world that we live in as well as our family. I hope we take that challenge. As Joe said a moment ago, we get so overwhelmed with everything that's going on in the world and we think there's no hope. Folks, there's always hope in God. Always. And as I said Wednesday night, instead of complaining about everything, how much time do we spend praying? For those in leadership, praying. God is well aware of everything going on in our world. And I think there will never be peace in the world until God is at the conference table. And I can tell you, He's coming. He's coming. Are you ready? Let's bow our heads together.